The words came out of her mouth in a broken whisper, but they struck the room harder than a scream. I need a boyfriend tomorrow. Behind the polished marble bar of the luxurious Belmont Hotel in Manhattan, New York, waitress Hannah Grace pressed a phone against her ear while tears slipped silently down her cheeks. She had spent years learning how to smile when life hurt, but that night, she could not hide it anymore. She did not know that someone standing only a few feet behind her had heard every word, someone who had everything money could buy, and almost nothing money could fix. Before we continue, if you believe in kindness, second chances, and the possibility that one small act can completely change someone's life, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us bring more stories of courage, compassion, and unexpected miracles. Hannah had worked at the Belmont for nearly 3 years. She was 27, hard-working, quietly funny, and the kind of person who remembered a guest's favorite coffee after serving it only once. Her uniform was always perfectly pressed, her dark hair pinned neatly behind her head, and even on exhausting days she tried to greet everyone with warmth. But beneath that professional smile was a woman carrying more responsibility than anyone knew. Her younger brother, Caleb, was finishing college in Pennsylvania, and Hannah had been helping him with tuition ever since their father died. Their mother had passed away years earlier, leaving Hannah with a painful lesson far too young. If she wanted something done, she had to do it herself. That evening had already been difficult. Hannah had accidentally broken a wine glass during the dinner rush, received a harsh complaint from a wealthy guest, and learned that the tiny apartment she rented in Queens was facing another rent increase. Then came the phone call that shattered what little strength she had left. Her Aunt Margaret had called to remind her about the family gathering the following afternoon. Hannah's former fiancé, Thomas, would be there with his new girlfriend. Thomas had left Hannah 6 months earlier, not because he had stopped loving her, but because he had decided her life was too complicated. He had promised to marry her, then disappeared when her brother needed help, and her family began struggling financially. But there was something worse. Thomas had spent months telling their relatives that Hannah had begged him to come back. Now, at the family gathering, he planned to announce his engagement to someone else. Hannah knew exactly how the room would look at her, the unmarried waitress who could not move on, surrounded by people quietly feeling sorry for her. Her aunt had even told her, almost jokingly, that she should bring someone to prove she was doing fine. That was why Hannah whispered into the phone, "I need a boyfriend tomorrow." She laughed bitterly through her tears. "I know it sounds ridiculous. I just need someone to walk in with me, so everyone will stop looking at me like I failed." She never realized that someone was listening. Behind her stood Nathaniel Brooks, the 42-year-old owner of the Belmont hotel chain. To the public, Nathaniel was a billionaire known for his sharp suits, intimidating business instincts, and complete control over his empire. Employees rarely saw him laugh. Investors called him brilliant. Newspapers called him ruthless. But the truth was far more complicated. Nathaniel had lost his wife, Rebecca, 5 years earlier after a long illness, and since then, he had built walls around himself so thick that even he no longer knew how to climb over them. He had come downstairs that night because he could not sleep. He had expected to inspect the restaurant and return to his penthouse upstairs. Instead, he found himself watching Hannah wipe her tears with the corner of a napkin, trying desperately to compose herself before returning to work. Nathaniel approached slowly. Hannah immediately straightened, horrified that the hotel owner had seen her crying. She apologized and promised she was fine. But Nathaniel did something unexpected. He simply asked whether she needed help. Hannah shook her head, embarrassed, and told him she only needed a favor that was impossible. "What kind of favor?" he asked. She looked at him, almost laughing at the absurdity of the situation, and said she needed a boyfriend for one day. Nathaniel was silent. Then, to her surprise, he said, "I can do that." Hannah thought he was joking. But the billionaire was completely serious. He offered no grand speech, no romantic promises, and no conditions beyond one simple rule. He would accompany her because he understood what it felt like to stand in a room full of people and feel completely alone. The next afternoon, Hannah stood outside her aunt's house in New Jersey, trembling beside Nathaniel. She had expected him to arrive in an expensive sports car, but instead, he came in a simple black sedan. He wore a dark suit without a tie, and when he noticed Hannah nervously twisting her fingers, he quietly told her she did not have to prove anything to anyone. Inside, the family conversation stopped the moment they entered. Thomas stared. Hannah's aunt nearly dropped her glass, and Nathaniel calmly introduced himself as Hannah's friend. The room filled with whispers. Thomas tried to make a joke, but Nathaniel's quiet confidence stopped him. Yet Nathaniel never humiliated him. He simply stayed beside Hannah. When Thomas eventually pulled Hannah aside and accused her of pretending to be happy, Nathaniel overheard. Hannah looked down, ashamed, and admitted that she had brought Nathaniel because she was tired of being treated like the woman who had been left behind. Nathaniel looked at her and said something she would never forget. "You were never left behind. You were carrying everyone else forward." For the first time in months, Hannah cried without trying to hide it. What began as a one-day arrangement slowly became something neither of them expected. Nathaniel began visiting the restaurant more often. Not as the billionaire checking his property, but as a man hoping to see one particular waitress smile. Hannah discovered that behind his expensive suit was a lonely man who still kept his late wife's favorite book on his nightstand. Nathaniel discovered that Hannah could make an entire room brighter, simply by caring about people who had nothing to offer her. But just when Hannah began believing that perhaps life was finally giving her a second chance, Nathaniel received devastating news. His company was facing a massive financial crisis, and several board members wanted him removed. Worse, someone had leaked photographs of Nathaniel and Hannah together, claiming the billionaire was involved with an employee. Hannah immediately offered to leave. She told Nathaniel she did not want to destroy his reputation. Nathaniel shook his head. He had spent years believing his money protected him from pain. Now he understood that money could buy silence, lawyers, and beautiful rooms. But it could not buy trust, so he stood before the board and told the truth. Hannah was not a publicity stunt. She was not using him, and he was not ashamed of caring about her. The boardroom fell silent. Nathaniel walked away from the meeting with his position intact. But the victory meant little compared with what happened afterward. He found Hannah outside the hotel, holding a small cardboard box containing the few belongings from her locker. She had decided to resign, so his employees would never question his judgment again. Nathaniel took the box from her hands. Then he told her that he had started the relationship as a favor, but somewhere along the way, she had become the person he looked for. Whenever the world felt too heavy, Hannah began crying, not because she was rescued by a billionaire, but because for the first time, someone had chosen her when there was nothing to gain. Months later, Hannah was no longer working behind the hotel bar. Nathaniel had helped her enroll in a hospitality management program, something she had dreamed about but never believed she could afford. She eventually became manager of one of the Belmont's restaurants. And Nathaniel, he still wore expensive suits and attended enormous business meetings. But he smiled more. He laughed more. He even learned how to make Hannah's favorite coffee. One evening, as they stood together beneath the lights of Manhattan, Hannah remembered the desperate words she had spoken months before. "I need a boyfriend tomorrow." She smiled and looked at the man beside her. She had thought she needed someone to make her family jealous. What she really needed was someone who could see her worth when she had forgotten it herself. And Nathaniel had thought he needed to save Hannah. Instead, she had quietly saved him. If this story touched your heart, please like the video, share it with someone who needs to hear that they are not forgotten, and subscribe to the channel. Sometimes the greatest miracles do not arrive with thunder or angels. Sometimes they arrive as a person who simply stays when everyone else walks away. Before the ending, comment "I believe in second chances" if you believe that kindness can change a life. Because Hannah never truly needed a boyfriend tomorrow. She needed someone to remind her that her life was still worth fighting for, and Nathaniel never needed someone to complete his fortune. He needed someone to remind him that even after heartbreak, a human heart can still choose to love again.